Kirill Razlogov is a film and culture expert, an ex-program director of the Moscow International Film Festival. He headed the Russian Institute for Cultural Research. He has been teaching history of world cinema at the high courses of screenwriters and directors for more than 50 years. He has an academic degree of Doctor of Art Studies.
Добрый день, Кирилл Эмильевич.
Добрый день.
Вы будете представлять...
Mr. Razlogov, you'll represent Russia in the jury of the 4th BRICS Film Festival starting in Brazil. During the last festival, the Russian media reported that the main goal of the festival is to popularize movies, quote, created outside the USA and Europe. Is it really the main objective of the festival or only one of many?
Дело в том, что когда это придумывали...
The matter is that it was the idea of the Prime Minister of India, and with our help, with my participation, the work was a little bit different.
Другой. Задача была...
The task was to show that the center of the film industry exists not only in Hollywood, but in India and China as well, and that is certainly so. The majority of movies existing in the world are made in Southeast Asia. Both directors and viewers are more numerous in this territory. And the movies from Hollywood and Western countries are just an option. Even the technologies are different. In India, for example, an average duration of a movie is more than 3 hours. The movie is shown with a break. People come to the cinema almost for the whole day. It used to be the same in Hollywood, where there were 2 movie programs, but that was in the 50s. After all, today, an average film lasts about 2 hours, and their festivals are generally guided by this type of movies. Our Indian colleagues wanted to show that movies are made not only there, but generally in their country, and in Russia too. These movies are made differently because of the different cultures, different traditions. These movies have their audience, often bigger than that of Hollywood pictures. It's necessary to show the cinematography. Brazil is a strongly film-making country, and China is also a strongly film-making country. China and India, in general, are making more than a half of the world's movies. And Russia is not the last country in this respect, though it is connected also with Europe. And, except for Africa, in which the motion picture art only begins to develop, all other countries are the big film-making countries. Therefore, the festival should show, and tries to show, that there are other models of cinema, not less, but even more interesting than the model to which we have gotten used to. You got ahead of my question. I wanted to ask about the modern film industry of South Africa. You've just said that it's only beginning to develop. So what's happening right now in South African cinema? South Africa produces about 10 movies a year, full-length feature films. They're generally devoted to the fight against apartheid, the recent African history. There's an obvious interest to the question of women's rights, too. South African documentary films are perhaps more interesting than feature ones. But the feature cinema has success in South Africa and in the neighboring African countries. So it's not one of those countries where there is no cinema at all, but it is one of those countries where the cinema needs to be developed. The program of the festival is very varied. Tell me a bit about the main positions. The part which interests me first is movies. There's an official movie competition with very tough regulations, just 2 movies from each country. Russia presents 2 pictures. The movie Tsarbird, which won the first prize of the Moscow Film Festival last year, and the movie Tudor, a work of a very young director. In addition, there are special programs. One of them is the program of recently restored old movies. Russia presents 2 films, Fragment of an Empire, 1926, by Friedrich Ermler. This is super classic. And the State Film Fund team has not only restored it, they added frames that were cut out in different copies. It was made of several copies. The second picture is the movie by Marlen Khutsiev. It was the month of May. It is a TV movie, restored and shaped up. There will be a program of short students' films. I take part in it, as I teach at VGIK. We selected these pictures, selected students' works. Again, we offered these works to organizers. They selected several works from VGIK, several works by other film schools, both in Moscow and St. Petersburg. There will be a program of full-length animation pictures. Animation is very demanded, very popular today. They will show one cartoon from the Three Warriors series, made by the film studio Melnitsa. The archival program seemed very interesting to me. If I get it right, it's the first time they're showing a movie of the 20th century of the festival, isn't it? Yes, it is. It is the first time this program has become common for all participating countries, with an emphasis on film restoration, on the reconstruction of how these pictures looked when they were released. This is a very fashionable trend. Jane Fonda said in one of her speeches at a conference devoted to the restoration of cinema heritage that it would be good to spend on restoration of classics, film classics, as much money as it is spent on the production of new movies. Of course, no one listened to her, but it's proven by how people treat classics. She, Martin Scorsese, people working in the State Film Fund, in other archives of the world. So this program reflects great interest to the cinema heritage. China presents the movie Goddess in the archival program. It's 1934, a very hard time for China in politics, but very much, one may say, beneficial in terms of cinema. The 1930s are called the golden age of Chinese cinema. How did the cinema develop in the Celestial Empire in that period? The cinema has always been popular in China. This was the period of social difficulties. And in the period of social difficulties, creativity blossoms as a rule. It was especially important for China because it was a practically uncensored period. Still, the cinema was not perceived as something having important political value. Therefore, very different movies were made. But in movies in China, as well as in other countries of the world, personal feelings, personal experiences were more important than some social cataclysms. Though military movies, the ones about the liberation movement, were also a success. But they gained an impetus in post-war China, when the military topic became the key one. And not long ago, I prepared a festival of military patriotic movies in Volokholamsk. And Chinese military pictures have always been demanded. But these are pictures which were kind of officially supported in China, and they will surely be nominated at the BRICS Festival. Besides, China has a mighty film industry, covering both its own audience and a considerable part of the world audience, because the Chinese work for the Chinese living all around the world.
Охватывает и свою аудиторию, и значительную часть мировой аудитории, потому что китайцы работают на китайцев, живущих во всех странах мира.
You've just said there was no censorship in China, and when or approximately in what decade did it appear there? I guess it appeared right there in the 30s, but most of all during the war in the 40s, and during the post-war period, during the Civil War. It demands an extra rigid censorship. And then, as in all countries of the socialist system, the socialist orientation, censorship became one of the main mechanisms, due to which film process was built. First of all, they looked at what kind of film it was, what it was about, and whether it contained any dangerous ideas. After that, the film containing no dangerous ideas, but only official ideas, got the green light. There was also a period in the history of China, the period of Cultural Revolution, when they made 1 or 2 movies in a year, or in 5 years. Those were revolutionary operas, and everyone watched them, because no one made other movies in China. And then, when the tough regime was cancelled, in the 70s, the Chinese cinematography suddenly emerged, very lively too, and they began to make 150 pictures in China per year. Chinese cinematography regained the status of the world's largest. Today, they make even more movies. A little less than in India, but nevertheless, a lot of them. The Indian cinema of the 20th century developed just as promptly, and the festival will show the movies of the 70s, The Village of Brahmins, and The Circus. In the Soviet Union, many works of Indian directors were watched with pleasure and loved. Does our cinema audience know these pictures, or will they be a new experience? They would be new for our audience if we showed them. We had our idols. Raj Kapoor was the main one, especially the post-war movie, The Tramp. It was popular among Soviet people. The movie Mr. 420. Those were generally melodramas with a kind of detective plot. Indian movies were the most popular in Russia. They were not as hostile as American or French ones. Therefore, it was easier for them to pass censorship. It had passion, strong feelings, and melodrama.
Цензурно оно было более проходимо. Вот. И там были страсти, там были сильные чувства, там была мелодрама. И вот была такая...
The movie Disco Dancer became a sensation. One girl wrote to the Soviet Screen magazine that she watched this film more than 40 times, voluntarily, without any violence from the outside. There's that. And then my colleagues, critics, began to accuse her of bad taste. As for me, I had another question. What vitamins for the soul should a film contain to make a person watch it 40 times, again without any violence and for their own money? After the fall of the Soviet Union, it was, I guess, only the Cinema of India channel that retained interest in once popular Indian movies. And one of the goals of the BRICS festival is to return the cinema the right of a full-fledged cultural product. Next year, the BRICS festival will take place in Russia, and I think it will be the year of return of the mass Indian cinema and the mass Chinese cinema to our viewers.
В России, я думаю, что это будет годом возвращения индийского кино, массового индийского кино и массового китайского кино к нашему зрителю.
В 20 веке
In the 20th century, the Indian cinema consisted generally of melodramas, as you have already said, and today's Indian cinema, does it have various genres? India makes about 700 movies a year. In each state of India, some of which have their own language, they make 220 to 230 movies. That is more than all of Russia. Therefore, naturally, the Indian cinema is very diverse. In some states, only men sit in cinema halls. They do not allow women. In the state of Kerala, people have such names as Stalin, Lenin, and Marxist influence is extremely strong.
Социальное кино, рассчитанное на бедную часть населения.
The social cinema for the poor population is the main one. Mumbai, where the so-called Bollywood is situated, makes big, entertaining productions. There are studios in the south of India where all things are combined.
Одно сочетается с другим. Есть штаты,
There's a state of Bengal where the intellectual, philosophical cinema blossoms. It has huge success at the international film festivals. The Indian cinema is very diverse.
индийское кино очень разнообразное.
And the host of the festival, Brazil, who will show The Cruel Gang by Humberto Maura in the archival program. It's classic. This director is called the father of national cinema in Brazil. What's so interesting about The Cruel Gang? Well, of course, except the fact that it is the semi-sound film.
Это период как раз перехода от немого.
This is the transition period from silent cinema to talking pictures. It is an adventure movie, Latin American cinema, adventurous in many respects. But for us, historians, the most interesting period of Brazilian cinema is the so-called Cinema Nova, a new Brazilian wave in the 1960s. They fairly preferred the older classical movies. Just to remind that Brazilian cinema existed when nobody except Brazilians knew about it. What's more, Brazil supplied practically all Latin America with movies. Therefore, it's no wonder that Brazil became the participant and the host of the BRICS Film Festival. The special feature of this festival is that it's based on the university situated in the big universal city.
Тоже особенность этого фестиваля на основе университета, большого университетского города, поэтому
Therefore, unlike BRICS festivals in other countries, a part of the program is educational. Students' movies, work with youth takes a more important place than at traditional festivals.
значительное место, чем в традиционных фестивалях.
я знаю, что еще
I know that a big part of the festival is devoted to courses. You can register and take a course either in English or in Portuguese. What are all these courses about? There are professional courses for cinematographers, the courses on the history of cinema, various cinema professions. This is a part of the training program characteristic of this festival.
Который составляет специфику именно этого фестиваля.
The goal of the festival is to unite BRIC cinematographers in order to discuss our common problems and mainly to discuss partnership development in the nearest future. And what are the plans? Perhaps some joint pictures or joint projects in BRICS. The plans are numerous, but these plans are implemented with great difficulty. After all, we have different languages, different traditions, customs. It's necessary to find some general subject.
Найти какую-то общую тему нужно.
Or, on the contrary, to make it a purely economic cooperation. Not long ago, a Russian-Chinese picture was screened in China. They expected a huge commercial success, which did not happen. It was the Chinese variant of Gogol's V.
Китайский вариант ВИА. Вот, потому что
But the Chinese viewer has other preferences.
предпочтение, любимый фильм в Китае,
The favorite movie in China is the Russian movie. The dawns here are quiet, because in the Chinese Civil War,
войны в Китае были истории вот с
there was also a lot of young women who were involved and died there too. Finding such subjects, looking at how they work, this task is very difficult. Every year I visit meetings where they discuss such issues. Yes, co-production is necessary. Yes, we need to show movies to each other. But still, we observe no big changes in this direction.
сдвигов в этом направлении не наблюдается.
Let's hope that the festival in Brazil will open some gate in this respect. I set special hopes on the festival that we will organize next year.
Спасибо большое, Кирилл Эмильевич. Спасибо.